that is coming out, halfway testing out, and some of the opportunities involved with that. So, Quinn, Charlene.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. So, like Ryan was saying, I'm going to be talking about the new user interface that we're going to be releasing. I guess we're less than a month out. I think the soft tentative date is, I think they had it at March 13th. It's a little subject to change. But going forward, it's going to have a whole new look than what you're currently used to. I was going to walk through how to do some of the trial testing with the new mobile app. It's a little bit cumbersome, so I'm just going to skip that for now, because in a couple weeks when we do release this new app, it'll just be an update on your phone. So if you have automatic updates on your phone for your mobile apps, it'll just update, and when you open it one day, it'll look a little bit different. If you do want to follow along in the time being between now and when it's released, I advise you to just go to your Safari, Google Chrome, whatever you guys use for a search engine, and then just type in to the URL is nextgen.myfieldnet.com, and you can kind of see it up at the top there, at least the first part of it. And it's going to direct you to what the new app is going to look like. It's your same username and password. So when you log in, it'll actually take you into your guys' account. But one of the first things that you're going to notice is we have essentially went to a map-centric view of your guys' farm. So whenever you log in within the old mobile app, more often than not, it was just going to pull up your equipment listing. Well, now we're going to give you the ability to just look at your farm essentially from a 10,000-foot view. If you are still interested in looking at the equipment view, there'll be within the website, it's going to be on the left-hand side. You'll see that little green arrow. In your mobile app, I believe it's actually on the bottom. But all it is once you click on that, it's going to show you all your equipment you have. So that's just going to be one of the first changes you guys are going to be seeing in the next couple weeks. From there, you can still select your devices you want to control. You can either click on it in the equipment view, or you can actually click on it down below. It doesn't really matter. And from that point, essentially this is where FieldNet is going to stay relatively the same. So if you want to be doing some sort of commands for that device, if you want to send it reverse, turn your water on or off, you can do that from here. You can change your plans from here. So for those of you who are utilizing full VRI, you can select those from the mobile app like you have been in the past. Changing rates, depths, that's where you can still modify it from here. And any of the ancillary controls that you are using or aren't using, you just got to scroll down. So within the mobile app, it's a little bit of, you got to move your finger a little bit to get to that point. And even setting the service stop is still going to be relatively the same. So if you want to set a service stop, you just click wherever you want it, or you can actually just select it within the actual degrees you want. So from the actual functionality of FieldNet, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of difference from, let's say, the day-to-day usage. Any questions? Yes?
Do you have to reset your stops and stuff like that?
So everything is going to get just transferred over. So whatever you had in there before should transfer into this new mobile app. If not, just call with our support line and they can help get it figured out. Yes? So with the current mobile app you have on your phone, it's just going to be an update. So you won't have to download anything. It's going to be that one. Now, if you have our really 2 generations ago mobile app, that is going to be completely cut off. So yes, that is going to be completely discontinued, yes. So we are going to be on one mobile app going forward. So one of the reasons was that this is kind of our end. Now we have the ability to, if we have to make a change. In the past, we've had to update that old app. Then we've had to update Apple, Google Play, and then we also had to update the website. What the thought is now we can just do all of this in one set of code. So we're able to adapt much faster. Where in the past, if there was a lot of feedback from the field, if somebody wanted some specific request, it took us a lot of time to implement that. Now, there's stuff that we're able to add realistically within 2 weeks if there's enough demand for it. So it's going to be a lot better for you guys. We're able to get a lot more of your wants and needs into this new mobile app going forward. But there will be a couple things we'll have to work through, like essentially the discontinuation of some older legacy apps. So Now, on to a couple new things that you realistically weren't able to see before. So this is just your normal dashboard, so you'll probably spend most of your time here. Now, if you click on this, you'll get a list of things that you can change. And one of the biggest things that's going to be added is sectional plans or advanced plans or VRI plans. We are going to be giving you guys the ability to change plans essentially from your mobile app. You don't have to go to the website anymore. You'll be able to just go into plans and you'll be able to select whatever plan it is you want to adjust or switch to or change a little bit. Makes it a little bit easier for you guys if you actually have to make a quick switch. It's going to be really easy within sectional plans if you want to speed it up or slow it down in a couple different spots. You now have the ability to do that on the fly. Within the VRI side of things, probably not going to be all that beneficial for you just because a lot of the plans are going to be within your desktop computer anyways. But if you have to make a minor little switch, you will be able to do that now going forward. End guns, this is something you had in the old app. You won't really have to learn a whole lot new here. So this will just be, hey, if I need to adjust my table a little bit based off of wind conditions, if I got to make sure I'm not going to get the sheriff cold on me, you're able to either click on whether, if you want to move it by hand, you can, or you can just go in and change your start and end angles numerically. Nothing really new here. Just a lot of this is just showing you where things are going to be, just so once we actually get into running time, you have at least somewhat of an idea of where to look. I'm going to skip through some of these other things. History, if you click on this, it's going to give you a history of your device for whatever date range you want. So if you want to look through an entire year, you can, and it's going to show you all your alerts throughout the year, where if you stopped in certain spots for whatever reason, I guess you could filter that out. Or you could just do it for a date range, say, hey, what all happened during this week? Is there something we can identify? You're able to look at that a little bit easier now within the mobile app. A lot of these other things are on initial setup. So if you have, whenever Ryan's setting up like a pivot control or something along those lines, he'll be messing around in here. And this is where you're going to put in a lot of your sprinkler chart information, GPS settings. So I wouldn't worry a whole lot about it. The one thing that I will touch on is on the settings tab at the bottom. For those of you who are using soft barriers, this is where you will adjust it. So just for one more time here on this drop-down menu, it'll be the bottom one called settings. And then this is where you'll be able to click in and say, okay, I want to put my soft barriers in at these different parts of the field. So it's kind of like the end guns. You just drag it and you can adjust it on the fly or you can put it in numerically. From a field net standpoint, it's still going to be the same field net that you love, just a little bit different look to it. With any questions, I got a couple things I wanted to touch on before I pass it back to Ryan. Okay, so the other thing that we have added that is relatively new is grouping. So this is something that's been lacking within our lineup. We've been asked from the field a bunch of, hey, we want to be able to separate our pivots out by different groups, whether it be crops or locations. Now we've finally gotten the ability to do that. So if you actually look on the left-hand side, you can see that you can already kind of see some of the groupings. So the first one is bean fields, and then the next grouping is corn fields. And in order to do that, you'll click on this top right-hand little button. It's going to have the initials of your operation. So once you click on that, there'll be this tab right here called Groups. And you click on that, and then this is where you'll be able to create your groups. So if you've got potatoes, corn, beans, whatever, or if you've got like a northwest cluster pivot, southwest cluster pivots, you can create that group. And then by clicking on this pencil here, you're able to add the different pivots that you want in there. So you have to apologize. I think I'm using my cell phone internet here, but you'll be able to just select these, and then once you select them, you'll hit save, and then it'll show up in that equipment listing on where those different machines will be. Let me get out of here, sorry. Awkward silence, my bad. One last thing I also wanted to touch on was some of our reporting that's going to be a little bit easier to pull up now. So some of the bigger reports that we've been asked to get is what is our applied irrigation, and then one of the other ones is pressure. We had this reporting built into our legacy website. It was really hard to get to, if I'm being completely honest. So now if you want to, you can just click on the right or the left-hand side here, or it looks like a little graph here, and then you're able to select some of the easier to pull reports that people are worried about. So within this pressure report, and you'll have to, I'm in our demo site, so trying to find an actual pivot that has pressure in it is going to be a little bit difficult. But you're able to see, based on a date range that you can customize down below, you're able to see what I believe it's the average pressure throughout that time frame. So this is important for if you think you have a sprinkler package that might be a little bit old. This might be a really good way to tell, hey, if our pressure's too low or our regulator's doing anything, and it's something you work with Ryan to maybe identify, hey, there might be some inefficiencies out there just based off of the pressure of the machine that you're able to pull. Like I said, I apologize, there should be something pulling up, but it's kind of hard to simulate pressure when there's nothing really there. Oh, there's one. There we go. And like I said, you can adjust it for however you want. So if you want to do it for a year, you can change it from, let's say May 1st to September 1st, or if you're looking at particular time frames, you can adjust it to however you want. There's a lot of customizability that you guys will have at your fingertips. That is the new UI in a really quick nutshell. Any questions? Where to find things, how to find things. Like I said, it's still relatively the same. It just has a little bit of a facelift, and there's a couple extra features that we've built in that hopefully make your guys' life a little bit easier. Okay. I'm going to briefly touch on our irrigation scheduling software called FieldNet Advisor. It's going to be relatively quick just because we can really get in the weeds. And I'm not trying to rain on Ryan's parade and let him speak on sprinklers. So what FieldNet Advisor is our cloud-based irrigation scheduling software. So ultimately what we're doing is we're just taking checkbook irrigation scheduling and we're putting it in the cloud. So we're giving you whole farm irrigation scheduling, which I will touch on in a little bit what I mean by whole farm. We're modeling your crop available water throughout the year. So whenever you get done with planting, you put in your planting information. So I will use corn, for example. I'm from Nebraska. That's the favorite crop we grow. So you'll put in your planting date, whatever hybrid you have. We just want to know how many GDUs to maturity we need to get to that point. And essentially from there, we have our start and our end date. So we're able to give you an irrigation recommendation based off of how that crop is growing, because we have field-specific weather data that's built in with our partnerships, either through PESL or currently as it stands, DTN. So we're able to give you field-specific weather information as well, so you can get field-specific ET, which is important, and then anything that can go into that Penman-Monteith equation that actually gets you to a crop ET. We're also then overlaying that the ET and then other inputs and outputs in that process, and we're able to give you soil zone specific soil water balance. So we know what's getting pulled out and what's getting put in, and we also know how much available water is present in that soil type, because we're just pulling that straight off of the USDA's website. If you guys do have EC mapping, we can upload that as well, so we can actually get very specific soil data out in the field. We give you daily VRI prescriptions, whether it be sectional or full VRI. So every morning at 4 o'clock, it'll update, and then you're able to receive, that day's VRI plan. I've already touched on field-specific weather data. We do give you in-season satellite imagery. It's nothing high-tech. It's just whatever the free Sentinel imagery is. I wouldn't say it's the most accurate, but it does give you the ability to see some things that might pop up throughout the year. So as you're getting towards the end of the year, you might be able to say, hey, is there a nozzle that's been plugged up? You have the ability to potentially see that ring show up, and that's something you either go fix, or once again, if Ryan and his team need to go out, they can get something done there too. We're also able to give you crop growth as well. So essentially any day, we're able to predict the growth stage of any crop. So if we're in the middle of June and we've got corn that's knee high, we're able to predict, hey, that we're at V6 corn, because that's all just based off of GDU calculations. And it's all seamlessly integrated within FieldNet. Within that new user interface, I can walk somebody through that if they want to talk after the fact. but it's not a separate app. Once you log in and you have Advisor, it's just going to be right there, right next to your equipment. So it's going to be easy to flip-flop between the two. Let's see if this works. All right. So obviously with that, though, there needs to be a value proposition with it. So when we came out with Advisor in 2017, we actually had 2016 a trial done in O'Neill, Nebraska. It's in the north central part of the state. And essentially what we did was we had an Advisor field and a control field. The control field, we just asked the grower to irrigate how he normally does. Just don't change anything. If you're going to irrigate, go for it, feel free. And then for the Advisor side, there is a portion within there that'll give you a recommendation, essentially saying start the pivot on June 20th or something along those lines. And whenever Advisor was calling for that start date, we just turned the pivot on, ran it circle, and then we waited till we got another start date. So at the end of the year, in these fields, it was the same soil types, same hybrid, same planting date, as similar as everything you can possibly get. After the combines had went through, we're able to pull the yield data, and we're actually able to see a 7 bushel an acre increase in yield, all while using 2.5 inches less of water. So we've done a couple other studies in 2020. We're always looking to try to do more. 2020 was interesting, obviously with COVID. But I was kind of in charge of doing those within, let's say, the western part of Nebraska. The big one that comes to mind immediately was we had a grower who was east of Bridgeport, which is in the Panhandle. You guys probably don't really care about Bridgeport, but we weren't able to see a yield increase, but we were able to save the grower 5 inches of water, which, depending on where you're at, 5 inches of water on my side of the state, on the east side, might equate to, I don't know, let's say $10 an acre, maybe even 20. But on their side of the state, they were pulling from such a deep aquifer in that spot, we're actually able to save them $50 an acre. So some of those savings really start to add up. And in this particular instance, it turned out to be about a $35 an acre increase he got just by utilizing FieldNet Advisor. And ultimately, what does it cost? We've actually changed our pricing structure for Advisor, where in the past it was essentially by pivot subscription. We've went away from that, and once this whole new user interface gets rolled out, it's going to have a new pricing, and it's going to be based off of your irrigated acres. So depending on what tier you're in, you're going to have essentially, even if we were to do the average of the first tier, it's going to be right around a buck an acre. Now, if you're up in the 2,000, it brings it down to a fair bit more, but it's going to be about at least a 50% price decrease in what we had in the past. So we're really going to be allowing growers to go whole farm enrollment all at once at a significantly discounted price. So you're able to sign up all your machines with an Advisor at a very price-friendly point. We also have a product called Water Trend. That is essentially, for simplicity's sake, just a 7-day crop ET calculator. So what we do is essentially the same setup process as Advisor, but we aren't looking at the soil water balance. We're just focused on, hey, every 7 days, based on this crop's planting date and GD's maturity, how much water is getting pulled out of the system by ET. We're also able to track precipitation, and then ultimately you're given essentially, hey, in the next 7 days, you're either going to be positive water or negative water. So that also will have a little bit different pricing going forward. This is a product that if I really wanted to, I could be up here for about 2 hours really digging into it, because there's a lot of data behind it. It's, you got 50 to 60 years worth of data within that checkbook irrigation scheduling model. We could dive into soil zones. We can dive into GD. There's a bunch of stuff we could really get into. But if there's something you're interested in, feel free, find me, and we can talk about it, maybe dig in a little bit more. But that's all I've got. Any questions from anybody on Advisor, FieldNet? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan then.
Thank you. Okay, there you go. All right. My little portion that we're going to talk about here is I get asked a lot, what are the new updates? What should I be updating on my pivot? What should I be checking? What's something that is potentially costing me money in yield or in inefficiency that I'm not aware of? So I have just a brief presentation here on some sprinklers and some variable rate information that in a lot of cases saves a lot of money, makes a lot of money in an operation. There's that. Okay, so in simple terms, importance of an application chart. Flow is pressure, as in, this doesn't work too well. There you go. Gallons per minute and pressure. Obviously it's important because that's the water you're putting out. That's the water you're applying, and it makes a difference. Even a small variation in gallons per minute and pressure affect how you're going to be watering your crop. So, in simple terms, a flow meter. A flow meter lets you know how much you're putting out, if you're short of gallons or if you're high of gallons. Questions I get asked, well, why are the gallons higher than they're supposed to be? In a lot of cases, either you have a leak someplace or your sprinkler package is worn out and you're pumping more water than you should be. So a flow meter is a crucial part of an irrigation system. And with, again, this particular flow meter, it's a magnetic flow meter that can be viewed on FieldNet remotely or in person. So secondly, simple, a pressure gauge. Probably the cheapest, most profitable thing you could put on an irrigation system. And why is that? Well, the pressure, again, based on your chart, affects everything that you're putting on. Your pressure affects your application, your speed, and how much water your crop is getting. So, in again, simple terms, you have a 15-pound regulator. The pressure on top of it has to be 5 pounds higher than that. So you have to have 20 pounds on it. So if, for instance, your water pressure is lower than it should be, let's say your sprinkler chart shows 40 psi and you're at 30, that means your regulators are not opening at the end of the machine, which means you're shortening the water that you need there. And the most common thing I see is, well, there's water coming out, so it should be watering. These regulators could be halfway open, delivering half the water they're supposed to be. And if you don't identify it close enough, you're not putting on the water you think you are. So, sprinkler chart accuracy is the other part. Again, these are put together based on gallons per minute and pressure. They're put together on the size of tires you have. So if you change the tires, it'll change your chart and it'll change how much you're putting on there. Now again, seems very simple, but I run into this all the time. Just last year, I had a grower re-nozzle his pivot. He bought the sprinklers from someone else and didn't update his chart in his panel, so he thought he was putting on half an inch of water, and it turns out he was only putting on a quarter of an inch of water, and didn't realize it until he saw a bunch of streaks in his field of what's going on. I looked at FieldNet and I said, well, you have your own settings in there. And that's when he told me, well, I replaced my sprinkler chart. Oh, well, accuracy makes a big difference in the chart. Secondly, end gun accuracy. Again, simple concept, but your end gun is supposed to wrap around like that in this water pattern. If it's not, you're either overwatering or underwatering the area that it's supposed to be in. Again, costing acres, costing dollars. Sprinkler spacing. This is becoming more and more of an issue in the age of your pivot. So when you say sprinkler spacing, what does that mean? Well, 20 years ago, they spaced sprinklers further apart than they do now because corn's a lot taller now. Varieties are a lot taller. Populations are higher. So if you don't have the proper spacing, you get areas that aren't getting watered properly. And this is called the close down point. So 20 years ago, the close down point was the fifth tower. meaning they put sprinklers every outlet after that. Well, now some of the newer ones, we're doing 4th tower, 3rd tower, so you don't have these gaps in watering. So gaps in watering, they look like this. This is from the University of Nebraska. Your spacing is this, your corn height's 8, 10 feet, in some cases 12 feet. And what they have here is the change in the soil moisture content under the sprinklers are good, but in this case, they're spaced too far apart and the heights are lower, so then we're getting this lower stuff, lower water. So, what does that look like? Looks like this. And they've recorded 20 to 40 bushels yield variation has been recorded when you see these dips in the crop, just from these being potentially too far apart, or, like we say, having a plug sprinkler, a worn out sprinkler, or perhaps the wrong nozzle. So here's another example. You see rings like this. 1, 2 of them, 3 of them, which is usually in that area where the overlap isn't as sufficient. And again, it's hard to see, it's hard to tell until it's too late, like in these cases. So there you go. Poor uniformity is basically what it comes down to. Uniformity. One on the left, everything's uniform. One on the right is non-uniform because the sprinklers are worn out, not operating properly. Regulators may not be working properly, and that's what you get. And this is from a aerial imagery that you can get a version of this on Advisor like Quinn just talked about. So you can actually look at this and see this, but again, in most cases, when you start to see these, the losses have already started taking place. Of course, this one, maybe not a lot of you move your pivots yourself, but in this case, they moved the pivot and they didn't put the spans in the right order. So they have one that watered way too much and then the others didn't water enough. But so there you go. So replacing old sprinklers and regulators. Well, when should we do it? Well, how many hours do you have on it? Sprinkler companies tell us 10 to 12 years is when sprinklers are worn out, when regulators are worn out and they're not working properly. So some of these symptoms, like I mentioned, your flow is more than your sprinkler package design, or your pressure is lower than your design. Wetter area at the beginning, or your crops are growing unevenly, like I just said. So there you go. So then this is more of a design on regulators. So in this case, a regulator malfunctions at 1,100 feet, system with 40 pounds of pressure. That would produce a 37% overflow. Now, I've heard it said, well, a little extra water isn't that big of a deal. Well, in a lot of cases, more water means other parts of the machine aren't getting enough water. And if you have a well that isn't very strong, then you're low pressure. And like we mentioned before, you're low on pressure, your regulators aren't putting out the water they should. All right, here's another example. Plugged worn nozzles. Again, it all seems very simple, but we get this a lot of times. Guys see it, and they don't see it at the end of the year. And what should we do? How can we prevent this? And this is a big savings and money maker. And I'll show you that in just a minute here. But so here's an example. If 2 sprinklers are plugged 1,100 feet from pivot, performance diameter 56 feet, almost 10 acres are affected, which will result in decreased yields. So we're talking 2 sprinklers. So me, I'm a numbers guy, so I did some numbers. We talked earlier, 30 to 40 bushels per acre, it's 20 to 40, so I decided on 30. 10 acres, 30 bushels, times $4 corn, $1,200. Those 2 sprinklers just cost $1,200. And that's dollars to me. And like one of those pictures I showed you, there was multiple rings like that. So you're talking like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 of things that you don't see until the end. So, basically, it's a good idea to go inspect sprinklers and see if they're working properly. Check your packages for your spacings and check your pressure gauge and your flow meter. Simple things to check. And again, makes big difference dollars and cents wise. Let's see. This is just more of a sales side of it, of which sprinklers are best. Again, varies on soil type, droplet size, wind conditions. Again, a big one there, pattern integrity. Wind makes a big difference, so small droplets get easily affected by wind. So we like to go with, at least around here, rotators, because they got a more solid stream. It shoots out, they're very uniform, and you get a bigger distance of coverage. And there, that's a pressure regulator, and that's how they work. I show this because a lot of people ask me, well, how can a pressure regulator wear out? It's just it's a regulator. Well, the spring gets wore out, and before you know it, it's either not letting water out or it's letting out too much water. And that's basically how they look, or if they get plugged. A plugged issue is another thing, gets plugged above there, and you're not getting the water out that you need to. Okay, so other things that make you money, save you money, in this case make it, end of pivot sprinkler. And what this one is an R55. You put it right underneath the end gun. And you do that for when your end gun turns off, you have this area in between that doesn't get watered. These little corners right here, because you don't want to hit the road, because people don't like you watering the road. So these have been found to give you 10 additional acres of watered acres. So again, that's in a full quarter-mile pivot. Of course, that varies where you have your end gun zones, but again, 10 additional watered acres makes a big difference. So there you go. So that kind of cuts, or that ends the portion of things that I've seen in the field where people have told me about saving money, making money. This next one is I'm just going to touch on variable rate irrigation. Not going to get too deep into it, kind of like Quinn said with his. We could talk about this for several hours, but we're just going to touch on the things that we can do with it. So basically, variable rate irrigation is you can control the speed of your pivot, which is basic VRI or precision VRI. Precision VRI is controlling every single sprinkler on the pivot. And in both cases, saves you water, saves you power, chemical, fertilizer, and of course time. So the first one, basic variable rate irrigation. This is the one Quinn just talked about in FieldNet Advisor. This is the plan you would get with your subscription for your farm. Gives you a map like this. So as you can see, red is an area where less water, blue is more water, and it does in a pie shape basically. So there's nothing turning off or on, it just varies the speed of the pivot. And these things get kicked out of Advisor every day, and you can choose to run them or you can run your own plan. So what's nice about these is the way they can save you a lot of money, time, water, all those things, is these areas of the fields that require less water, it'll speed up the machine automatically. So you're running less hours, using less water, less power when you run these plans. And again, you can choose to use them if you want, or you can select and do your own watering plan. But again, takes care of a lot of variations in soil, low areas, and it's automatic. You click on it and it runs it. Okay, so the next is precision variable rate irrigation. This is what I mentioned a little bit ago. Control every single sprinkler on the pivot. And we can do that with wireless nodes that are along the machine. They all communicate wirelessly, and we can control every single sprinkler. We can put it on any brand of pivot. This just mounts next to it. Gives you a nice screen of what map you're doing, and you can control all this remotely as well. These are what the nodes look like. Again, they're all wirelessly communicate, and they each control 4 sprinklers, and each sprinkler has a valve like this. This is an electric actuated valve, similar to what you have on a sprayer for variable rate spraying applications. Very simple setup. No air lines, no water lines running along the machine like with other systems. It's very simple, and we don't have issues with these. Ran by GPS. GPS is on the end of it, so it knows exactly where everything is, and that's how it makes your applications. So again, basically the way it works, full VRI, it'll control the speed of your pivot. Percentage VRI, you set the speed you want, and it'll just apply a percentage onto the areas that you want. Very simple. You set in percentage mode, you set your pivot at 1 inch. 50% goes in this spot, 75%, 25%. Very, very simple setup. So your maps look like this. Again, we already covered kind of the basic one, but when you get into the precision ones, you can really get into a lot of technical soil maps, coverages, planting maps, and get highly specific areas to water. So a question we get a lot is, well, if we're doing all this, what's it going to do to my water pressure? We talked about water pressure earlier. So here's, again, a quick example. On this particular pump, you got to look at the pump curve. We cut our gallons in half. Our pressure goes up 10 pounds. Well, that's not that big a deal. On this next pump, you cut your gallons in half. This one goes up 36 pounds. So then you're getting some higher pressure numbers from where you normally do. So your pivot could go from 40 to 76, 80 pounds. So in this case, you might want to put a variable speed control on your pump to lower the pressure, save some power. Another common thing we do with VRI is not watering waterways, ditches, areas that either can't do water, wetlands, things like that, where we can turn everything off as you're going over it, and it doesn't matter the shape, because, again, we can control every single sprinkler on the pivot. Another common one, well, maybe not real common, but we've seen it a few times, is when you have pivots overlapping, you can put a VRI machine in there, and you can control the areas you're watering, not watering in those areas. And as I said, everything gets pulled together for this VRI platform in the software that we have. I mean, we're talking water holding capacity, crop parameters, soil types, all can be pulled together into one plan. And a nice example I have here is one like this. This one here, the grower took the planting map off of his planter, all the elevations, and these are all the elevation variations in his map. So this field varied all through the field, like 1-2 feet up and down. And the issue he had, the high spots would burn up, the low spots would drown out. And no matter what he did, he couldn't get it right. He was either burning it or drowning it out. So he used his elevation map of his planter. It was a huge file, but we got it sorted through. And here he had a couple maps. Here's a full VRI map where you can see the inches applied. And then he had a percentage map where it was just a percentage. So you can see more water here. This was a low area that he didn't want to water at all. The first year he used it, he said the combine, everything was even. Previous years he had all these up and downs like we had shown in the other picture, but not from sprinklers, but because of the soil variation. First year, He said he was harvesting corn. Everything was even, the best yields he's ever had. Of course, he wouldn't give me the specific yields because no one likes to do that. But this is a prime example about how this can work really, really well. And of course, this one has the overlap I just mentioned too, where it was turning off so he wasn't overwatering the other crop at the same time, because that's also a thing he was previously doing.
So Ryan, when you're
Yep.
on the precision VRI, is that speed up your pivot?
Yes.
Since you're shutting part of it off?
Yep. Yep. So when you're doing that, like in this case, where it's turned off out here or here, right here, yes, that'll control the speed of the pivot, speed it up, slow it down. So yeah, then there's power savings, wear and tear savings. If you're applying chemical, you're going to put more chemical, of course, where you're watering, and none where you're not watering. So yeah, that's good question. Okay. Another example. This was a longer machine. This is one we've had for quite a while, but it's a very, very good example of what you can do. This was a 2,400 foot machine, so of course it's really magnified the results you get, but that's why we like it. So here we have some low spots that the grower could not farm, could not harvest because they'd always drowned out whenever he would water through it. In fact, he would typically get stuck in these areas. So we put together just a simple map, and these spots here where they started their season basically watering 0 in all these spots. And towards the end of the year, they put some in there just to sustain the crops. But again, very simple zones. And since this was a larger pivot, all these areas came up to about 40 acres, as it turns out. So here's the yield map before VRI. You can see the areas they couldn't harvest, couldn't plant. And the next one looks like that. So basically, now the colors vary because of the combines were set differently as they're making passes, but the settings are different. But so basically, you go from that to that. So they picked up 40 acres of harvested crop. This map was 2 years, but in the first year they did that. This, by far, in a way, paid for itself the first year and every year after that. Of course, after that, they got a little more technical with their plans and came up with something like this. They're still watering 0 in these spots, but 50%. Here's a hilltop where they're doing 100%. Same thing. It's a good example because it's such a large pivot. The results are really magnified, but very interesting, very profitable way to increase the value of a land. So, okay, last example. This one is just basically, what was this? This one is basically how you can adjust throughout the season. So they started the season, and these are all dry spots, hot spots. So he adjusted his map, and you can see halfway through, it got a little bit better. Towards the end of the season, everything was really good except for this really, really high hilltop over here. But basically, you can affect the entire field. Even if you don't have the lowland areas, watering where it needs to be makes a big difference at the end of the season. So there you go. Right on time. So these are the things that, just to summarize, check your sprinkler chart because it makes a big difference in the water you're putting on and how it works. Flow meter, pressure gauge. Make sure they work correctly. If you're having pressure issues, it could be your sprinkler package, it could be your pump, it could be a lot of different things, but if you don't have a water pressure gauge, you don't know what's going on or not going on. Check your sprinklers. Nozzles, regulators, sprinkler heads. As we talked about, having 2 sprinklers not working properly towards the end of the machine could cost $1,000 per ring. That's a lot of money, a lot of difference. Your end gun areas. And then, of course, the variable rate, precision variable rate. All things that we'd be happy to talk to you about in greater detail. We can inspect your sprinklers if you'd like. We can look at your charts and look at your spacings, look at your setup and see if it's something that we would recommend updating. So yeah, basically that's what we got. Yep, that's it. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, you all taking time out of your day to be here. If there's anything else, any questions you have, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Let's see. Quinn, did you have anything else you want to add to that? Any other questions at all? And anything I covered? I know it's a lot of information, but yep, Cody. Oh, the box? I've requested that every year when they've asked to do that, but are they working on that, Quinn? I'm told they are, but I don't know. Yep. Yep. Correct. Yep. Yep. But yes. Yeah.
And there's a lot that along with the field net, so like we're also working through that phase of what we really need it.
Yep.
We got some things we have to look at, but it's been asked why it's so constant.
Right. Yep. So yeah, I mean, so like that's something that I've requested on that, but it's kind of the brains of the whole system. But again, a more simple one is the request. So yeah, you can control a span or two if you don't need the whole thing. Yep. Yep. Correct. Yep. Any other questions at all? Yes, sir. Yep. Or can they? Oh, yeah. Quinn, can you answer that? As far as the field pivots overlapping each other, if we can we set a parameter in that for field net so they don't do that?
It's like a collision detection.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the past we've had a rules-based system to where you could essentially we kind of jimmy the system to where whenever we will assign end guns to specific areas and when they enter that area, it gives you an alert. Going forward, we've actually recently purchased another telemetry company that had a patent on collision detection. We are working to integrate that into FieldNet today. I don't know what it's going to look like. There might be an upcharge that's a couple of management levels above me, but within the near future, you will have the ability to, if you're willing to, obviously if it's an upcharge, if you're willing to pay that upcharge, you will be able to set collision detection alerts, as in these two pivots are close to each other. I don't think we're going to tell one to shut down or not, but you'll get a special alert that says it's up to you, but these two pivots might collide. Sure. So that we're working through that process of integrating it into our current field net system. Yes, that's a very, very complicated.
So it's coming. Yep.
And I think with liability reasons, we technically can't command the pivot to stop, so it still will be in your guys' hands. But you will actually have something that says you are in a collision zone. It might, like I said, it could be there. This is such a new thing with the field net. Like I said, we bought this company, and we'll see how it works.
Yep.
It might have an ability that says, hey, do you want it to stop? And it might just be an auto default. If one pivot is in the area, it might shut the machine off. But like I said, I might be speaking out of it. So.
So there you go. Something that's coming. Any other questions at all before we let you out of here? Yes, sir.
What's your take on top mount regulators versus normal drop?
Good question. That was actually in my slides, but I took it out because no one does it around here. In Nebraska, it's becoming a lot more growing trend, putting the sprinklers on top, just like you say, because corn is so tall. even you put the regulator or the sprinklers at truss length, you're still into the canopy a couple feet. So I guess the short answer, it's becoming very popular in Nebraska to put the regulators and rotators on top, and then it's the same sprinkler basically, it's just inverted, same regulators on top. So, and there's tons of guys doing it, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's, yeah. Yep.
Promoting it, but with how tall things are getting.
Yeah.
At least in our
Right. So it's definitely, it's a growing trend, and hasn't really taken off up here, but down in Nebraska, there's lots of people that do it. Just for the reason then that I mentioned, tall crops. So, yeah. And that's the issue is you get it up there, and yep, then you have more wind drift. So it's kind of a horse apiece. Do you put it down in the canopy where you're not getting your overlap sometimes, or you have it on top? Right, it's better than the old rainbirds that shot it 100 feet in the air. So, yeah. So, there we go. Any other questions before we wrap it up here?
Is there any cost sharing with the
Interesting question from the crowd. Yes, there is. NRCS programs will give you cost share for updating your sprinklers and updating your variable rate, or to install a variable rate system, somewhere between 40 and 60% to put on the variable rate system, to put on new sprinklers, or to make any modifications to your pump of that. So check with your local NRCS office for that. Lots of you have done that already, but yes, it is a program that they still have, and it's kind of a yearly thing, how much you can get into it. Good question from the audience. Okay. Well, there's no other questions. We'll call it good. Again, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Take your time out of your day. And we'll see you around.